Valeria, I can't introduce you to my colleagues as a factory worker. It's embarrassing for someone in my position. Those words shattered my heart as I stood in our bedroom, still wearing my work uniform after a 14-hour shift at the textile factory. The same uniform I had worn for 3 years while working double shifts to pay for his MBA program at the prestigious business school across town. Marcus had just received his diploma and landed a high-paying job at a consulting firm. The same man who used to thank me for my sacrifice was now ashamed to be seen with me. "I've worked myself to exhaustion for your education," I whispered, my hand still stained from the factory dyes. "And I'm grateful," he said coldly, "but now I need a partner who fits my new lifestyle, someone who understands the corporate world." He was packing his designer suits, the ones I had bought him for interviews with money earned from my factory wages, while telling me our marriage was over. "You served your purpose, Valeria, but I need someone who can help my career, not hold it back." If you've ever sacrificed everything to build someone else's dream, only to be discarded for not being sophisticated enough, stay with me. When I married Marcus 5 years ago, I thought I was building a future with a man who shared my dreams of success and prosperity. We were both 25, both ambitious, both determined to create a better life than the one we had grown up with. Marcus was working as a junior accountant at a small firm, and I was a seamstress at a local clothing manufacturer. But we had big plans for our future together. Marcus had always talked about getting his MBA, about moving into management consulting, about building a career that would provide financial security and professional prestige. I supported his ambitions completely, even though it meant our dreams of starting a family would have to wait. "Once I get my MBA, everything will change for us," he would say during our evening walks through our modest neighborhood. "I will be able to provide the kind of life you deserve, the kind of opportunities we both want." I believed in his vision, and more importantly, I believed in us as a team. When Marcus was accepted into the executive MBA program at the state university, we celebrated like we had won the lottery. The tuition was expensive, nearly $80,000 for the 2-year degree, but we saw it as an investment in our shared future. The financial reality was daunting. Marcus would need to reduce his work hours to attend classes and complete assignments, which meant a significant drop in his income. The tuition payments, books, and other expenses would strain our budget beyond its limits. We needed a plan that would allow us to survive financially while Marcus focused on his studies. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I left my job at the clothing manufacturer and took a position at a textile factory across town that offered overtime opportunities and higher wages for those willing to work extra shifts. The work was more physically demanding, the hours were longer, and the environment was harsher, but the pay was nearly double what I had been earning. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked when I told him about the job change. "Factory work is so much harder than what you're used to." "I can handle it," I assured him. "This is temporary. Once you graduate and get a good job, I can find something better. Right now, we need to focus on your education." The factory job was everything I had expected, and worse. I worked on an assembly line, operating heavy machinery that required constant attention and physical stamina. The shifts were typically 10 to 12 hours long, but I often volunteered for overtime, working 14 or even 16-hour days to maximize our income. The work was repetitive and exhausting. My hands became permanently stained from the dyes and chemicals used in the textile process. My back ached from standing for hours at a time. My ears rang from the constant noise of the machinery. But every paycheck brought us closer to Marcus's graduation, closer to the future we were building together. Marcus threw himself into his MBA program with the same dedication I brought to my factory work. He attended classes in the evenings and on weekends, spent hours studying and working on group projects, and networked with classmates and professors who could help advance his career. I supported his efforts completely, taking care of all the household responsibilities so he could focus entirely on his studies. Our social life changed dramatically during this period. Marcus's new classmates were professionals from various industries, lawyers, doctors, engineers, and business executives who were pursuing advanced degrees to further their careers. Their wives were often professionals themselves, marketing managers, financial advisors, real estate agents, women who could contribute to the networking and relationship building that was such an important part of the MBA experience. I felt increasingly out of place at school social events. While other spouses discussed their careers in finance or technology, I had little to contribute to conversations about corporate strategy or market trends. My days were spent operating machinery and meeting production quotas, not analyzing business cases or developing marketing plans. "You don't have to come to every event," Marcus suggested after a particularly awkward cocktail party where I had struggled to connect with his classmates' wives. "I know you're tired from work, and these networking things aren't really your scene anyway." I agreed, thinking I was being supportive by giving him space to build the professional relationships that would benefit his career. What I didn't realize was that my absence from these events was allowing Marcus to present himself as unattached, free to focus entirely on his professional development without the complications of a wife who didn't fit into his new world. As Marcus progressed through the program, I noticed changes in the way he spoke, dressed, and carried himself. He started using business jargon in casual conversation, wearing expensive clothes that I had bought him with money earned from my factory wages, and expressing opinions about industries and markets that he had learned about in his classes. "You wouldn't understand," became his standard response when I asked about his coursework or tried to engage with his new interests. "It's pretty complex business theory." The dismissal stung, but I told myself it was temporary. Once he graduated and we were both working in our chosen fields, we would be able to relate to each other as equals again. I just needed to be patient and supportive until he achieved his goals. The physical toll of my factory work was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. I was losing weight from the stress and exhaustion, developing chronic pain in my hands and back, and struggling with insomnia despite my physical fatigue. But I pushed through because I knew our sacrifice was temporary and our future was worth the struggle. Marcus seemed oblivious to my deteriorating health and well-being. He was so focused on his studies and his emerging professional identity that he rarely asked about my work or acknowledged the physical demands I was facing. When I tried to share my struggles, he would remind me that his program was also stressful and demanding. "We're both making sacrifices," he would say, but his sacrifices involve studying in comfortable classrooms and networking at upscale restaurants, while mine involve standing for 14 hours a day in a noisy, dangerous factory environment. The comparison felt increasingly unfair, but I kept my resentment to myself because I believed we were working toward a shared goal. The first real crack in our relationship appeared during Marcus's second year in the program. He had been selected for a prestigious internship at a major consulting firm, an opportunity that could lead to a full-time job offer upon graduation. The internship required him to work long hours and attend client meetings, which further reduced the time we spent together. This internship could change everything for us," he explained when I complained about never seeing him anymore. "If they offer me a job, we'll finally have the financial security we've been working toward." But when he talked about us and we, I began to notice that his vision of our future seemed to primarily focus on his career advancement and professional success. My role in this future was never clearly defined beyond continuing to provide financial and emotional support for his ambitions. The internship was successful, and Marcus received a job offer that would start immediately after graduation. The salary was triple what he had been earning as a junior accountant, with opportunities for rapid advancement and significant bonuses. We had achieved the goal we had been working toward for 2 years. But instead of celebrating together, Marcus seemed increasingly distant and critical. He complained about our small apartment, our modest furnishings, our lack of sophisticated social connections. He began talking about the lifestyle changes he wanted to make, a better neighborhood, upscale restaurants, networking events that often kept him out until late in the evening. "You need to start thinking about how you present yourself," he told me one evening after I had embarrassed him at a company social event by not knowing who a particular business leader was. "People judge me based on who I'm with." The criticism was devastating because it targeted things about myself that I couldn't easily change: my background, my education, my work experience. I had sacrificed 3 years of my life to support his education, but instead of gratitude, I was receiving judgment about not being sophisticated enough for his new lifestyle. I began to withdraw from social situations, declining invitations to company events and professional gatherings where I felt out of place and unwelcome. Marcus seemed relieved by my absence, able to focus on networking and relationship building without worrying about how I might reflect on his professional image. The isolation was crushing. I was working long hours at the factory, coming home to an empty apartment because Marcus was often out at business dinners or networking events, and spending my weekends alone while he played golf with colleagues or attended professional development seminars. I tried to talk to Marcus about how isolated and unappreciated I felt, but he dismissed my concerns as jealousy or insecurity. "You should be happy that I'm successful," he said during one of our increasingly rare conversations. "This is what we worked for. This is what you sacrificed for." But his success didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like his achievement that I had helped make possible, but was no longer welcome to share. I was expected to be proud of his accomplishments while hiding the work that had made them possible. The financial benefits of Marcus's new job were significant, but they came with strings attached. He wanted to move to a more upscale neighborhood, to buy expensive furniture and electronics, to live a lifestyle that reflected his new professional status. But he also made it clear that my factory job was an embarrassment that needed to be addressed. "You can quit the factory now," he told me. "Find something more appropriate for someone in my position." But when I asked what kind of work he thought would be appropriate, his suggestions were vague and unhelpful. He wanted me to have a job that sounded impressive at cocktail parties, but didn't seem to care whether it was fulfilling or financially viable for me. The breaking point came 6 months after his graduation at the company's annual holiday party. It was a formal event at an upscale hotel attended by all the firm's employees and their spouses. I had bought a new dress and spent extra time on my appearance, hoping to make a good impression and support Marcus's professional relationships. But from the moment we arrived, I could see that Marcus was uncomfortable having me there. He introduced me to his colleagues with obvious reluctance, quickly steering conversations away from any topics that might lead to questions about my work or background. When one of the senior partners asked what I did for a living, Marcus answered for me before I could speak. "Valeria's between careers right now," he said smoothly. "She's exploring different opportunities." The humiliation was loud, but what was worse was the realization that Marcus was ashamed of the work that had made his success possible. The factory job that had paid for his MBA was now something to be hidden, denied, erased from the story of his achievement. That night, as we drove home from the party, Marcus finally said what I had been dreading to hear. "I think we need to talk about our future," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about where my career is heading, about the kind of life I want to build." "What kind of life?" I asked, though I already suspected what he was going to say. "A life that matches my professional aspirations," he said. "I need a partner who can help my career, who fits into the world I'm trying to build. Someone who understands the corporate environment, who can network with clients and colleagues." "Someone who isn't a factory worker?" I said quietly. "Someone who isn't embarrassed to be seen with me." And the words cut through me like a knife. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, processing the devastating realization that the man I had sacrificed everything for now saw me as an obstacle to his success rather than the partner who had made it possible. The woman who had worked 14-hour factory shifts to pay for his MBA was now too embarrassing to be seen with. The hands that had been stained with chemicals to fund his education were now too rough to hold in public. The sacrifice that had made his dreams come true was now something to be ashamed of and hidden. But in the darkness of that sleepless night, something else began to stir inside me. Not just hurt and betrayal, but anger. Anger at being used and discarded. Anger at having my sacrifice dismissed as worthless. Anger at allowing someone else to define my worth based on their narrow vision of success. The woman who had been told she was too embarrassing for his new lifestyle was about to discover what she was truly capable of when she stopped seeking approval from someone who couldn't see her value. The morning after Marcus told me I was too embarrassing for his new lifestyle, I sat at our kitchen table with my factory uniform laid out for another 14-hour shift and made a decision that would change everything. I was not going to beg him to see my worth, not going to try to transform myself into someone he could be proud of, and not going to fight for a marriage with someone who was ashamed of the sacrifice that had made his success possible. I was going to let go of everything. The marriage that had become a source of shame, the man who saw my love as an embarrassment, the future we had planned that apparently had no place for the woman who had made it possible. I was going to start over completely, and I was going to build something that honored my own worth rather than someone else's narrow definition of success. The conversation with Marcus was brief and final. I found him in our bedroom getting dressed for another day at the consulting firm where my factory wages had helped him secure his position. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," I began, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest, "about needing a partner who fits your new lifestyle." He looked up, perhaps expecting me to plead for another chance or promise to change myself to meet his expectations. "You're right," I continued. "You do need a different kind of partner, and I need a different kind of husband, one who values sacrifice, who appreciates loyalty, who isn't ashamed of honest work." "Valeria, if you're willing to make some changes," I interrupted. "The only change I'm making is leaving. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm moving out." He looked genuinely surprised, as if he had expected me to fight for our marriage or beg him to reconsider. "You don't have to be so dramatic. We can work this out." "No, Marcus, we can't. You've shown me exactly who you are, someone who uses people when they're useful and discards them when they become inconvenient. I'm not going to waste another day trying to earn respect from someone who's incapable of giving it." The divorce proceedings were straightforward since I wasn't asking for anything beyond my freedom. He kept the apartment, the furniture we had bought with my factory wages, and the lifestyle his MBA had made possible. I took my personal belongings, my work clothes, and my determination to build something better than what I was leaving behind. I moved into a small studio apartment near the factory, a space that was modest but entirely mine. For the first time in years, I could make decisions based on my own needs and preferences rather than someone else's expectations or judgments. The first few weeks were the loneliest of my life. After 3 years of working every available hour to support Marcus's education, I suddenly had time to think about what I wanted for my own future. The silence in my apartment was overwhelming at first, but gradually I began to see it not as emptiness, but as possibility. I started by taking care of my own health, which had suffered during the years of exhausting factory work and emotional stress. I found a doctor who understood the physical demands of manufacturing work and began addressing the chronic pain and fatigue that had become my constant companions. I also began researching educational opportunities for someone with my background and experience. While I had been supporting Marcus's MBA, I had never considered pursuing my own education. But now, for the first time in years, I could think about my own goals and aspirations. I discovered that my 3 years of factory experience, combined with my previous work in clothing manufacturing, had given me valuable knowledge about production processes, quality control, and manufacturing efficiency. These weren't just manual labor skills. They were technical competencies that could be the foundation for a career in industrial engineering or operations management. I enrolled in evening classes at the community college, starting with basic business and mathematics courses that would prepare me for more advanced study. The decision to go back to school at 30 was intimidating, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in my marriage, I was investing in my own future rather than someone else's dreams. The work was challenging, especially while maintaining my factory job to pay for living expenses and tuition. But I found that I loved learning, loved the intellectual stimulation of solving problems and understanding complex systems. My practical experience in manufacturing gave me insights that my younger classmates lacked, and my professors began to recognize my potential. You have an unusual combination of theoretical understanding and practical experience, my operations management professor told me after I had presented a case study analysis based on my factory work. That's exactly what employers are looking for in this field. I threw myself into my studies with the same dedication I had once given to supporting Marcus's education. But this time, the effort was entirely for myself. I studied late into the night after my factory shifts, completed assignments during my lunch breaks, and used my weekends for research and projects. The transformation wasn't just academic, it was personal. I began to see myself differently, not as someone whose value was determined by her ability to support someone else's ambitions, but as an individual with her own goals, capabilities, and potential for success. I also started building new relationships with classmates and professors who valued my contributions and respected my work ethic. These people saw me as Valeria the student, Valeria the future engineer, not as Marcus's embarrassing wife who needed to be hidden from professional colleagues. The most difficult part of letting go was releasing the anger and resentment I felt toward Marcus. I had to accept that he would never acknowledge my sacrifice, never apologize for his treatment of me, never recognize the value of what I had given to support his success. But I also had to accept my own role in the situation. I had allowed myself to become so completely defined by my relationship with Marcus that I had lost sight of my own worth and potential. I had been so focused on being useful to him that I had forgotten to invest in my own growth and development. You can't control how other people treat you, my counselor reminded me during one of our sessions, but you can control how you respond to that treatment. You can choose to let their behavior define your worth, or you can choose to define your own value based on your actions and achievements. I chose to define my own value. I chose to see my 3 years of factory work not as wasted time or unappreciated sacrifice, but as preparation for understanding manufacturing processes from the ground up. I chose to see Marcus's rejection not as evidence of my inadequacy, but as liberation from a relationship that had never truly valued what I offered. 2 years after leaving Marcus, I completed my associate's degree in industrial technology with highest honors and transferred to the State University to pursue a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering, the same university where Marcus had earned his MBA. But this time, I was there for myself, funded by my own work and academic scholarships I had earned through my excellent performance. I also left the factory job that had defined my identity for so long and took a position as a production supervisor at a manufacturing company that valued my combination of practical experience and technical education. The work was challenging and rewarding, and for the first time in my adult life, I was earning recognition and advancement based on my own merits, rather than my willingness to sacrifice for someone else. The decision to let go had been painful, but necessary. I had released my attachment to someone who couldn't appreciate what I offered,
And in doing so, I had found people who could. I had stopped defining myself through someone else's success and started building an identity based on my own values and capabilities. The woman who had been told she was too embarrassing for her husband's new lifestyle was discovering that she had been embarrassed by the wrong person all along. 4 years after Marcus had told me I was too embarrassing for his corporate lifestyle, I stood in the conference room of Advanced Manufacturing Solutions, presenting my efficiency improvement proposal to the company's executive team. The woman who had once been ashamed of her factory uniform was now wearing a professional suit, speaking with confidence about production optimization and cost reduction strategies that could save the company millions of dollars annually. The transformation had been gradual but profound. After completing my bachelor's degree in industrial engineering, I had been recruited by AMS, a mid-size manufacturing company that specialized in automotive components. My combination of hands-on factory experience and formal engineering education made me uniquely valuable to a company that was struggling to bridge the gap between theoretical efficiency models and practical production realities. "Your recommendations could revolutionize our production line," said Jennifer Walsh, the company's CEO, after I finished my presentation. "You understand both the technical aspects of manufacturing and the human factors that other consultants miss." The project I had proposed would redesign the company's main production line, incorporating lean manufacturing principles with worker-friendly ergonomic improvements. My factory experience had taught me that efficiency gains meant nothing if they came at the cost of worker safety and satisfaction. And my engineering education had given me the tools to design systems that optimized both productivity and working conditions. The success of that project led to my promotion to senior manufacturing engineer, then to production manager, and eventually to director of operations. Each advancement brought new challenges and responsibilities, but also validation that my unique background and perspective were valuable assets in the manufacturing industry. I had also started consulting with other companies on manufacturing efficiency and workplace improvement projects. My reputation in the industry was growing, and I was frequently invited to speak at conferences about the importance of combining theoretical knowledge with practical experience in manufacturing design. "Your perspective is rare in our field," one conference organizer told me. "Most engineers have never worked on a production line, and most line workers don't have formal engineering training. You bridge that gap in a way that benefits everyone." The consulting work was both financially rewarding and personally fulfilling. I was helping companies improve their operations while also advocating for better working conditions for manufacturing employees. Every project was an opportunity to prove that efficiency and worker welfare weren't competing priorities. They were complementary goals that could be achieved simultaneously. My personal life had flourished in unexpected ways. I had met David, a quality control manager at one of my client companies, during a project to improve their inspection processes. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect for each other's expertise and shared values about the dignity of manufacturing work. He told me, "I love that you understand what I do. Most people think manufacturing is just mindless assembly work, but you know how complex and skilled it really is." He had worked his way up from the factory floor, just as I had, and he appreciated the journey I had taken from production worker to engineering director. Our relationship was everything my marriage to Marcus hadn't been: supportive without being dependent, passionate without being possessive, built on genuine appreciation for each other's accomplishments. We had married the previous year in a small ceremony attended by colleagues, friends, and family members who celebrated our success rather than judging our backgrounds. The contrast with my first marriage was stark. Marcus was proud to introduce me to his professional contacts, eager to share my achievements, and genuinely interested in my work and opinions. The financial rebuilding had been challenging, but ultimately successful. I was now earning more than Marcus had ever made at his consulting firm, and every dollar was the direct result of my own efforts and expertise. I had been able to buy a house, start building retirement savings, and even establish a scholarship fund for first-generation college students pursuing engineering degrees. The most important change was internal. I had developed an unshakable confidence in my own worth and capabilities. I no longer needed other people's approval to feel valuable, no longer defined myself through my relationships with others, no longer apologized for my background or my journey to success. This new confidence was tested when I encountered Marcus at an industry conference about 2 years after our divorce. He was there representing his consulting firm, which had been hired to help a manufacturing company with strategic planning. I was there as a keynote speaker, presenting on innovative approaches to production efficiency. The encounter was brief but telling. Marcus seemed surprised to see me in a professional setting, clearly not expecting his former factory worker wife to be speaking at the same conference where he was trying to win new clients. "Valeria," he said, approaching me after my presentation, "I had no idea you were in this field now." "Industrial engineering," I replied professionally. "I've been working in manufacturing optimization for the past few years." He looked confused, as if he couldn't reconcile the confident professional standing before him with the woman he had dismissed as too embarrassing for his lifestyle. "That's impressive," he said, though his tone suggested he was still processing this information. "I heard your presentation was very well received." "It was," I confirmed, not feeling the need to elaborate or seek his approval. The conversation was awkward and brief, and I felt no satisfaction in his obvious discomfort. I had moved so far beyond our shared past that his opinion of my success was irrelevant to my sense of worth and accomplishment. I had also started mentoring other women who were trying to transition from manufacturing work to engineering careers. Through the scholarship fund and volunteer work with community colleges, I helped students who faced similar challenges to the ones I had overcome: financial constraints, family obligations, and the perception that factory workers couldn't succeed in technical fields. "You're proof that it's possible," one of my mentees told me after she had been accepted into an engineering program. "When people tell me I'm not smart enough for engineering because I work in a factory, I think about your story and keep going." These relationships reminded me why I had chosen to transform my personal experience into a platform for helping others. Every student I mentored, every worker whose conditions I improved, every company I helped become more efficient and humane, they were all part of the legacy I was building from the ashes of my first marriage. The work was demanding but deeply fulfilling. I was using my unique combination of practical experience and technical knowledge to make a real difference in an industry that employed millions of people. I was proving that success could be built on any foundation, that worth wasn't determined by where you started, but by how far you were willing to climb. I had also started writing about manufacturing and engineering topics, contributing articles to trade publications and industry websites. My writing focused on the importance of valuing all types of knowledge and experience in technical fields, challenging the assumption that formal education was the only path to expertise. One article in particular had gone viral, a piece titled "The Factory Floor PhD," that argued for recognizing the knowledge and skills that production workers developed through years of hands-on experience. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds of comments from workers who felt seen and validated by my words. "You put into words what I've been feeling for years," one reader wrote. "I know more about this production process than any engineer who's never worked on the line, but no one listens to my suggestions because I don't have a degree." The article led to speaking opportunities and consulting requests from companies that wanted to better utilize the knowledge and experience of their production workers. I developed training programs that helped engineers and managers understand the value of frontline expertise, and created systems for incorporating worker feedback into process improvement initiatives. 5 years after leaving Marcus, I was invited to speak at the same university where he had earned his MBA. The topic was Non-Traditional Paths to Engineering Success. And the audience included current students, faculty, and industry professionals. Success isn't about following a prescribed path. It's about recognizing the value in every experience, learning from every challenge, and refusing to let other people's limited vision define your potential. After the presentation, I was approached by several students who were working their way through school in manufacturing jobs, worried that their backgrounds would limit their career prospects. "Your story gives me hope," one young woman told me. "I work nights at a factory to pay for school, and sometimes I feel like I don't belong in engineering. But you show that my experience is actually an advantage, not a disadvantage." As I drove home from the university that evening, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought me to this point. 7 years ago, I had been a woman who felt worthless and embarrassed, whose sacrifice had been dismissed as inadequate by the man who she supported through graduate school. Today, I was a successful engineer, a respected consultant, a published author, and a mentor to others who were building their own non-traditional paths to success. I had proven that worth wasn't determined by other people's ability to appreciate your contributions, that success could be built on any foundation, and that the person who emerges from rejection is often stronger and more capable than the person who was dismissed. The woman who had been told she was too embarrassing for her husband's corporate lifestyle had built a career that was more successful and meaningful than anything he had achieved. But more importantly, she had built it on her own terms, using her own values, honoring her own experience. The rebuilding was complete, but the growing had just begun.
7 years after Marcus had dismissed me as too embarrassing for his corporate world, I stood at the podium of the International Manufacturing Excellence Conference, delivering the opening keynote to an audience of 2,000 industry leaders from around the globe. The woman who had once been ashamed of her factory uniform was now recognized as one of the leading voices in manufacturing innovation and workforce development. My company, Integrated Manufacturing Solutions, had grown from a small consulting practice to a firm with 40 employees, serving clients across North America and Europe. We specialized in bridging the gap between engineering theory and production reality, helping companies optimize their operations while improving working conditions for their employees. The conference theme was "The Future of Manufacturing: Integrating Human Experience with Technological Innovation," and my presentation focused on the revolutionary concept that had become my signature approach: treating production workers as technical experts whose knowledge was essential for true operational excellence. For too long, we've operated under the false assumption that formal education and practical experience are separate types of knowledge, I told the audience. The future belongs to organizations that understand these are complementary forms of expertise that must be integrated to achieve sustainable success. The response was overwhelming. During the Q&A session, executives from major corporations asked detailed questions about implementing our methodologies in their facilities. Several offered consulting contracts on the spot, and I exchanged business cards with industry leaders who wanted to explore partnerships and collaborations. But the recognition that meant the most to me came from the production workers who attended the conference. Men and women who had saved money to attend professional development sessions, who were hungry for validation that their knowledge and experience had value in an increasingly technical industry. "You're the first speaker I've heard who understands that we're not just pairs of hands," one assembly line supervisor told me after my presentation. "You know that we think, we innovate, we solve problems every day. Thank you for giving us a voice." These conversations reminded me daily why I had chosen to transform my personal experience into a professional mission. Every worker who felt valued, every company that improved both efficiency and employee satisfaction, every young person who saw manufacturing as a path to professional success,
They were all part of the legacy I was building. My book, The Hidden Engineers: Unlocking Innovation on the Factory Floor, had been published 6 months earlier and was already being used as a textbook in engineering and business programs. The book combined research on manufacturing psychology with case studies from my consulting work, demonstrating how companies could tap into the expertise of their production workforce. Your book is changing how we think about manufacturing education, the dean of engineering at a major university told me during our recent campus visit. We're redesigning our curriculum to include more emphasis on practical experience and worker collaboration. The speaking engagements had grown from local professional meetings to international conferences, from small workshops to keynote addresses at major industry events. I was regularly invited to speak about manufacturing innovation, workforce development, and the importance of valuing diverse paths to expertise. My personal life had reached a level of fulfillment I never could have imagined during my first marriage. David and I had celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary the previous month, and our relationship continued to be everything my marriage to Marcus hadn't been, built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine appreciation for each other's achievements. David had become my business partner as well as my husband, using his quality control expertise to develop training programs for our consulting clients. Together, we had created a comprehensive approach to manufacturing excellence that addressed technical, human, and organizational factors simultaneously. "We make a perfect team," he told me one evening as we reviewed proposals for our latest expansion into European markets. "Our vision and my attention to detail, we're building something that's going to outlast both of us." We had also started a family, welcoming our daughter Sophia 2 years earlier. Watching her grow and develop had given me new perspective on the importance of building a world where all types of knowledge and experience were valued, where success wasn't limited to narrow definitions of achievement. The financial success had exceeded all my projections. I was now earning more than I had ever dreamed possible when I was working 14-hour factory shifts to pay for Marcus's MBA. But more importantly, every dollar was earned through work that aligned with my values and contributed to meaningful change in an industry I cared deeply about. I had been able to expand the scholarship fund I had established, now providing full tuition support for 50 students annually who were pursuing engineering degrees while working in manufacturing. The program had a 95% graduation rate and had produced dozens of successful engineers who were changing their companies from within. "You didn't just give me money for school," one scholarship recipient told me at our annual dinner. "You gave me permission to see my factory experience as an asset rather than something to overcome." That changed everything for me. The relationship with Marcus had settled into complete irrelevancy. I occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances. His consulting firm had struggled during the economic downturn. He'd been laid off and was working as a freelance business advisor. His second marriage had ended in divorce. I felt no satisfaction in his difficulties, but I also felt no regret about the path I had chosen. The life I had built was so much richer and more meaningful than anything I could have achieved by staying in a relationship with someone who was ashamed of my background and contributions. The most meaningful recognition had come the previous year when I was inducted into the Manufacturing Hall of Fame, an honor typically reserved for executives and inventors who had made significant contributions to the industry. I was the youngest person ever selected and one of only a handful of women to receive the recognition. Valeria Martinez represents the future of manufacturing leadership, the selection committee chair said during the ceremony. She has revolutionized how we think about expertise, innovation, and the value of every person in the manufacturing process. The ceremony was attended by industry leaders, government officials, and academics who recognized the impact my work was having on manufacturing practices worldwide. But the guests that meant the most to me were the production workers, engineers, and students whose lives had been changed by the programs and philosophies I had developed. As I accepted the award, I thought about the woman I had been 7 years ago, exhausted, undervalued, convinced that her worth was tied to someone else's approval. That woman could never have imagined the life I was living now, the impact I was having, or the sense of purpose that defined my days. This recognition belongs not just to me, but to every production worker who has been told their knowledge doesn't matter, every student who has been discouraged from pursuing technical careers, every person who has been judged by their starting point rather than their potential. We are proving that excellence comes from many paths, that innovation happens at every level, and that the future belongs to organizations that value all forms of expertise. This is just the beginning of what we can accomplish together. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just recognition of my individual achievements. It was validation of a movement that was changing how the manufacturing industry viewed knowledge, expertise, and human potential. After the ceremony, I was approached by dozens of people who wanted to share their own stories of overcoming prejudice and building success from non-traditional backgrounds. Their experiences reminded me that my journey, while unique in its details, was part of a larger pattern of people who have been underestimated and had chosen to prove their worth through their actions rather than their credentials. The new beginning I had created wasn't just about professional success or personal vindication, though those were important. It was about discovering who I was when I stopped seeking approval from people who couldn't see my value, when I started building an identity based on my own experiences and aspirations. I had learned that being dismissed by someone with a narrow vision of success wasn't a limitation. It was liberation to find people who could appreciate the full range of human knowledge and experience. I had discovered that my factory background wasn't something to overcome. It was a foundation that made me uniquely qualified to bridge worlds that had been artificially separated. The woman who was told she was too embarrassing for her husband's corporate lifestyle had built a career that was more influential and meaningful than anything she had achieved. But more importantly, she had built it by honoring her own experience, valuing her own knowledge, and refusing to let anyone else define her worth. This was my new beginning, and it was more beautiful than anything I had lost. 9 years after Marcus had told me I was too embarrassing for his corporate world, I was leading a manufacturing innovation summit in downtown Chicago when I spotted a familiar figure sitting alone at the hotel bar. It took me a moment to recognize him. Marcus looked older, more worn than I remembered, and there was something defeated in his posture that was completely unlike the confident MBA graduate I had once known. I hesitated, debating whether to approach him or simply walk past. We had had no contact since our divorce was finalized, and I had built my new life without any reference to or dependence on our shared past. But something about his demeanor, the slump of his shoulders, the way he stared into his drink, reminded me of how I had felt during my darkest days after he left. "Marcus, are you all right?" He looked up, startled, and I saw that his eyes were tired and somewhat unfocused. "Valeria, I didn't expect to see you here." "I was speaking at the manufacturing summit," I said, settling into the chair across from him. "What brings you to Chicago?" His face darkened. "Job interviews. I've been out of work for 8 months now. The consulting industry has been brutal since the recession." The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had once been ashamed to be seen with a factory worker was now struggling to find employment, while I was thriving in an industry he had once looked down upon. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. The job market has been challenging for a lot of people. He went on to describe the familiar progression of professional decline,
The consulting firms downsizing, the difficulty of finding new clients as a freelancer, the gradual erosion of his professional network and financial security. I listened with the compassion I would show anyone facing career difficulties, setting aside our complicated history to focus on his immediate struggles. I keep thinking about the choices I made, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The people I hurt, the opportunities I wasted. I threw away everything that mattered for a lifestyle that turned out to be built on nothing solid. The admission was both surprising and heartbreaking. The man who had once been so confident in his professional trajectory was now questioning the very foundations of the success he had pursued. I heard about your company, about your success in manufacturing consulting. I saw your keynote presentation online. It was impressive, really impressive. Thank you, I said simply, not feeling the need to elaborate or seek his validation. I also heard about your book, your awards, the recognition you've received. You built something amazing from what I threw away. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between us. I could see the regret and self-awareness in his eyes, the painful recognition of how his choices had led to this moment. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "How did you do it? How did you go from factory work to becoming one of the leading voices in manufacturing innovation?" I considered his question carefully. I stopped trying to be someone else's version of successful and started building success on my own terms. I stopped being ashamed of my background and started seeing it as an asset. I stopped seeking approval from people who couldn't see my value and started finding people who could. "I was such a fool," he said, tears forming in his eyes. "I had a wife who was willing to sacrifice everything for our shared future, who worked herself to exhaustion to support my dreams, and I threw it all away because I was embarrassed by the very work that made my success possible." "You were young," I said gently. "You got caught up in appearances and status symbols. A lot of people make similar mistakes. But not everyone destroys their marriage and abandons someone who loved them unconditionally. I convinced myself that you were holding me back, that I needed someone more sophisticated. But you were the most sophisticated person I knew. You understood what really mattered." The conversation continued for another hour, and I found myself feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness for the dreams we had once shared, sympathy for his current struggles, and a strange sense of closure about a chapter of my life that had ended so painfully. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally, then stopped himself. "Never mind, I have no right to ask." "What were you going to ask?" "I was going to ask if you might consider hiring me or if you knew of any opportunities in your network, but I realize how inappropriate that would be given our history." I thought about his request. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect myself from any entanglement with the man who had caused me so much pain, but another part of me recognized an opportunity, not for reconciliation, but for closure, for the chance to demonstrate how completely I had moved beyond our shared past. "I can't offer you a position at my company," I said clearly. "That would be too complicated for everyone involved. But I can give you some advice about the manufacturing consulting market and put you in touch with some contacts who might have opportunities." "Why would you do that?" he asked me, clearly surprised by my willingness to help. Because holding on to resentment would only hurt me. Because everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life when they've made mistakes. And because I'm secure enough in my own success that helping you doesn't threaten me in any way. Over the following weeks, I provided Marcus with information about consulting opportunities in the manufacturing sector, introduced him to several contacts who were looking for experienced business advisors, and even recommended him for a project management position at a mid-sized company that needed help with operational efficiency. The process was professional and boundaried. I helped him as I would help any qualified professional who was seeking career guidance, without any personal involvement or emotional investment in his success. 6 months later, I received a brief email from Marcus. He had secured a position as operations manager at a manufacturing company, using the contacts I had provided and the advice I had given him about positioning his consulting experience for the industrial sector. I want you to know that your help changed my life, not just because you connected me with opportunities, but because you showed me what grace looks like. You had every reason to refuse to help me, but you chose compassion instead. That taught me more about character than any business school ever did. The email was gratifying, but it wasn't necessary for my peace of mind. I had helped him not because I needed his gratitude or validation, but because I was secure enough in my own worth to extend assistance to someone who had once failed to appreciate what I offered. The encounter had provided something I hadn't known I needed. Confirmation that my transformation had been complete and authentic. I had faced the man who had dismissed me, not as a victim seeking vindication, but as a successful professional offering assistance to someone in need. I had shown compassion without compromising my boundaries, provided help without sacrificing my dignity, and demonstrated that success was indeed the best response to those who had underestimated my worth. The encounter reminded me that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, that you can wish people well without welcoming them back into your life, and that sometimes the greatest victory is having the strength to help others even when they once failed to help you. Most importantly, it confirmed that the woman who had been told she was too embarrassing for her husband's corporate lifestyle had built something so much more valuable than what she had lost: a life based on authentic success, meaningful work, and the unshakable knowledge of her own worth. 12 years after Marcus had told me I was too embarrassing for his corporate world, I stood in the auditorium of the Valeria Martinez Center for Manufacturing Excellence at the State University, watching 300 students, faculty, and industry professionals participate in our annual symposium on democratizing engineering, creating pathways for non-traditional students. The center, established with a major donation from my company and named in recognition of my contributions to manufacturing education, had become a national model for programs that bridge the gap between practical experience and formal engineering education. It offered accelerated degree programs for working professionals, apprenticeship partnerships with local manufacturers, and research initiatives focused on inclusive approaches to technical education. The irony wasn't lost on me that the center was located at the same university where Marcus had earned his MBA, the degree I had funded with my factory wages while he learned to be ashamed of the work that made his education possible. Now, that same institution was celebrating the value of manufacturing experience and creating pathways for people like I had been to achieve professional success. The symposium's keynote speaker was Dr. Sarah Chen, a former production worker who had used our scholarship program to earn her engineering PhD and was now a professor at MIT. Her research on manufacturing psychology had revolutionized how companies approached worker engagement and process improvement. The future of manufacturing belongs to organizations that understand that innovation comes from every level, Dr. Chen told the audience. The programs pioneered here at the Martinez Center are proving that the best engineers are often those who understand production from the ground up. I sat in the front row, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The center had exceeded all my expectations, graduating over 500 engineers who were changing their companies from within, conducting research that was shaping national manufacturing policy, and creating a new model for technical education that valued diverse paths to expertise. Our scholarship program had expanded to serve 200 students annually, with a 98% graduation rate and job placement success that exceeded traditional engineering programs. The students came from factory floors, construction sites, and technical trades, bringing practical knowledge that enriched their formal education and made them uniquely valuable to employers. "You didn't just give me a scholarship," one graduate told me at the reception following the symposium. "You gave me permission to see my welding experience as preparation for engineering, not something to overcome. That changed how I saw myself and what I was capable of achieving." These stories reminded me daily why I had chosen to transform my personal experience into institutional change. Every student who felt valued, every company that benefited from their unique perspective, every young person who saw manufacturing as a path to professional success, they were all part of the legacy I was building. My relationship with David had deepened into something beautiful and enduring. We had celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary the previous month, and our partnership continued to be the foundation of both our personal happiness and our professional mission. Our daughter Sophia, now 7 years old, was growing up in a world where her mother's factory background was a source of pride rather than shame. "Mommy, tell me again about when you worked in the factory," Sophia would ask me during our bedtime stories. I would describe the machines, the teamwork, the problem-solving that happened on the production floor, helping her understand that all honest work had dignity and value. David had become the center's research director, using his quality control expertise to develop studies on the relationship between worker experience and engineering innovation. Together, we had created a comprehensive approach to manufacturing education that was being replicated at universities across the country. "We've built something that will outlast us," he told me one evening as we reviewed applications for our new international exchange program, which would bring manufacturing workers from developing countries to study at the center. "The impact we're having will continue for generations." The financial success of my company had allowed me to make increasingly significant contributions to causes I cared about. In addition to the university center, I had established a foundation that provided microloans to women starting manufacturing businesses in underserved communities, funded research on workplace safety and ergonomics, and supported advocacy efforts for fair labor practices. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition had come from an unexpected source. The International Labor Organization had invited me to serve on a global commission studying the future of manufacturing work, recognizing my expertise in bridging the gap between worker experience and technological innovation.
Your voice is essential to this conversation, the commission chair told me during our first meeting in Geneva. You understand both the technical and human dimensions of manufacturing in ways that few people do. The Commission's work was focused on ensuring that technological advancement in manufacturing created opportunities for workers rather than simply replacing them. My experience had taught me that the most successful innovations were those that enhanced human capabilities rather than eliminating human involvement. The relationship with Marcus had settled into complete irrelevance, though I occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances. He had found steady work as an operations manager and apparently had learned to value the practical knowledge of production workers. His second marriage had ended, but he seemed to have found some measure of professional stability and personal peace. I felt no satisfaction in his struggles or validation from his apparent change in perspective. My worth had long since been established through my own achievements and contributions, independent of his ability to recognize or appreciate them. The most profound moment of the symposium came during the panel discussion on pathways to engineering excellence. The panel included Dr. Chen, several of our scholarship recipients who were now successful engineers, and Marcus, who had been invited to speak about his experience working with engineers from non-traditional backgrounds. I hadn't known he would be there, and seeing him on the panel was initially jarring. But as I listened to his presentation, I realized how completely both of our lives had changed since our painful divorce. I used to think that formal education was the only path to expertise. I was wrong. Some of the most innovative solutions I've seen have come from engineers who understand production from the ground up, who combine theoretical knowledge with practical experience. He went on to describe specific examples of improvements suggested by engineers with manufacturing backgrounds, innovations that had saved his company millions of dollars and improved working conditions for hundreds of employees. The future belongs to organizations that value all forms of knowledge, he concluded. We need engineers who can design systems and engineers who understand how those systems actually work. The best solutions come from combining both perspectives. After the panel, Marcus approached me during the reception. Our conversation was brief and professional, but I could see the genuine respect in his eyes, not the condescending appreciation he had once shown for my sacrifice, but authentic recognition of what I had accomplished. "You've built something remarkable here," he said, gesturing toward the center that bore my name. "You've changed how an entire industry thinks about education and expertise." "Thank you," I replied simply, not needing his validation, but appreciating the acknowledgement. "I also want you to know that working with engineers from programs like yours has taught me more about manufacturing than my MBA ever did. You were right about the value of practical experience. I just wasn't smart enough to see it at the time." His words were gratifying, but they weren't necessary for my sense of completion. I had long since not needed his approval or anyone else's to know my worth. As the symposium concluded that evening, I stood in the center that bore my name, surrounded by students, faculty, and industry professionals who were committed to creating a more inclusive and innovative future for manufacturing. The walls were lined with photos of our graduates, research achievements, and partnerships with companies around the world. I thought about the woman I had been 12 years earlier, exhausted, undervalued, convinced that her worth was tied to someone else's approval.
That woman could never have imagined the life I was living now, the impact I was having, or the sense of purpose that defined my days. The circle was complete, but it had led to a place of influence and meaning that exceeded anything I had lost. The woman who had been told she was too embarrassing for her husband's corporate lifestyle had created an institution that was changing how society valued knowledge, experience, and human potential. I had come full circle, but to a much better place than where I had started. The factory worker who had been dismissed as inadequate had become a leader who was ensuring that no one else would face the same dismissal for the same reasons. The transformation was complete, but the mission would continue for generations to come. As I write these final words, 15 years have passed since Marcus told me I was too embarrassing for his corporate world and walked out of our marriage. I am now 45 years old, and I can say with absolute certainty that being dismissed by someone who couldn't see my worth was the catalyst for discovering my true potential and building a legacy that will impact countless lives. The Valeria Martinez Center for Manufacturing Excellence has become a model for institutions worldwide, graduating over 1,000 engineers who are transforming their industries from within. My company, Integrated Manufacturing Solutions, now operates on 4 continents and has been recognized as one of the most innovative consulting firms in the global manufacturing sector. But the numbers and accolades, while gratifying, aren't what matter most. What matters is the email I received last week from a former scholarship recipient who wrote that our program had given her the confidence to patent a manufacturing innovation that would improve working conditions for thousands of employees. What matters is the young man who told me that seeing my success had convinced him that his factory experience was an asset, not an obstacle to his engineering dreams. David and I celebrated our 10th anniversary last month, and our partnership continues to be the foundation of everything meaningful in my life. Our daughter Sophia, now 9, is growing up in a world where diverse paths to success are celebrated rather than dismissed, where her mother's factory background is a source of pride rather than shame. We have also welcomed our son Miguel, who at 3 years old already shows fascination with how things work and how they can be improved. Watching our children grow has reinforced my commitment to building a world where all forms of knowledge and experience are valued. The relationship with Marcus has become completely irrelevant to my sense of worth and purpose. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had found professional stability and personal peace in his work with manufacturing companies. I felt no satisfaction in his struggles or a validation from his apparent change in perspective. My worth had long since been established through my own achievements. To every person who has been told they're not sophisticated enough, not educated enough, not polished enough for someone else's vision of success, I want you to know that their inability to see your value says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. To every worker who has been dismissed as just a factory employee, just a technician, just someone who works with their hands, I want you to know that your knowledge and experience are valuable assets that can be the foundation for extraordinary achievement. To every individual who has sacrificed everything for someone else's dreams only to be discarded when you became inconvenient, I want you to know that your capacity for dedication and hard work are strengths that will serve you well when you finally choose to invest them in your own future. The journey from dismissal to recognition, from embarrassment to pride, from being told you're not enough to proving you're more than enough, is not easy. There will be moments when you doubt your abilities, when the voices of those who diminished you echo in your mind, when starting over seems impossible. But I promise you this, if you refuse to let other people's narrow vision define your potential, if you have the courage to build something that honors your authentic experience, if you choose growth over resentment and purpose over bitterness, You will discover capabilities and possibilities you never knew existed. You will find that you are more resilient than you imagined, more innovative than you believed, more deserving of respect and recognition than you were taught to think. You will discover that the person who rises from the ashes of rejection is often more authentic, more purposeful, and more powerful than the person who was destroyed. I am not the same woman who stood in that bedroom 15 years ago, listening to her husband tell her she was too embarrassing for his new lifestyle. That woman was defined by other people's approval, other people's definitions of success, other people's narrow vision of what was valuable and worthy. The woman I am today knows that real success comes from honoring your own experience, building on your own strengths, and creating value that reflects your authentic self. I know that being dismissed by people who lack vision is not a limitation. It's a liberation to find people who can see what you're truly capable of achieving. Most importantly, I have learned that no one has the power to determine your worth except you. Your value is not dependent on other people's ability to appreciate your contributions. Your potential is not limited by other people's narrow definitions of success. The woman who was told she was too embarrassing for her husband's corporate world discovered that she was perfectly suited for a world of her own creation, where knowledge was valued regardless of how it was acquired, where innovation was recognized regardless of where it originated, where success was measured by impact rather than appearances. If my story has inspired you, if it has given you courage to pursue your own transformation, if it has reminded you that your background is an asset rather than an obstacle, then every moment of pain and struggle was worthwhile. Your story is not over. Your greatest achievements may still be ahead of you. The experiences that others have dismissed as inadequate may be exactly what prepares you for extraordinary success. Trust your knowledge. Honor your experience. Build something that matters. And remember, you have always been more than other people's limited vision could see. You just needed to stop seeking their approval and start building your own legacy. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing in the power of transformation, resilience, and the courage to turn dismissal into determination. Now go create something extraordinary from whatever you've been through. The world needs what only you can build from your unique combination of experience, knowledge, and hard-won wisdom. You are not too anything for someone else's vision of success. You are exactly right for your own vision of what's possible.